So what I've done here is I drilled some holes through the box. I slipped the box up inside here, positioned it where I wanted. You can see a little indentation right there. I stuck a transfer punch through that hole and basically marked it on the floor plank. I've taken the screws out of this floor plank, and you can see this floor plank is out now. I've taken it out completely, and I drilled that hole, and if you look inside you can see there's a threaded insert. This is called a T-nut. So I'll flip this over, and that's a look at it right there. These things are they have incredibly aggressive little spikes on them. So I countersunk this so it would be flush with the bottom of the floor plank. But anyhow, you drill this size here through whatever piece of material you want, and then this gets pounded down into that, and those spikes grab in there and grip so it doesn't back out. And you have a nice strong threaded hole in softer material. So this is how I'm going to bolt the box down. So I'll get this floor plank reinstalled. I'll do the same to that other floor plank, and then I can officially set the box in and bolt it to the floor planking. So there's one of the holes right there, and there's the other hole right there. So I also picked up stainless bolts and big stainless fender washers to distribute that force out a little farther than just that one little area. But there it is. So these T-nuts I found at my local hardware store. They're 3/8 standard coarse American thread, and they're stainless, which is awesome. I was really hoping I could find stainless T-nuts, and I did. So we'll give you an update after the box is officially mounted. Alright, so we've got the box mounted in there now. We've got the T-nuts installed in this wide plank and the wide plank over here. Got the floor planks installed back in the boat. It'll be hard to see, but you can see there's a 3/8 by 2-inch stainless bolt with a 3/8 stainless washer on top of two stainless 2-inch diameter fender washers. So there's a better look at it. So that's how it's bolted down to the bottom of the boat, and it is rock solid. It's not going anywhere. So I've got to get my wires cut back to the official length. You can see how again, same thing, got the zip tie anchors. So it comes off the amp, zip tie anchor, zip tie anchor, zip tie anchor, and then nice little wire run right to the box, nice and clean. So I'll get my wire cut back, stripped. I can get the subs put in. And again, all of this has to come back out. We still have to encapsulate the floorboards and all of that stuff, but doing some of the last little bits of stuff in here, and then it'll all come out and I'll start clearing everything in epoxy coating. You'll probably notice now this aluminum that's on the back of my seat frames. There's one for the rear seat. There's also one up here for the front seat. I use number 8 by 1/2 inch stainless screws, drilled and countersunk about every 4 inches. And what this is it's 3/4 by 3/4 1/8 inch wall, aluminum, I guess we could call it channel. And basically I installed that the full width minus an 1/8 inch or so on each side. And my 1/2 inch marine ply the seat back is going to be made out of will actually, on this 12-degree angle, slide right into it, and that's going to lock it to it. And then we'll do the same thing with T-nuts and stainless bolts to hold the top of the front cockpit seat back. So T-nuts in the ply with a bolt from the back side and a washer to hold the front seat on. The back seat will be a little different. It'll still drop in that channel just the same, but I'll run a 2-inch wide piece of Velcro all the way across this frame and all the way across this frame, because you will access this area quite a bit more often than you'll need to get behind the front seat. To get in here and mop up bilge water or do any kind of wiring or whatever the case, get to the battery. So this seat will basically drop in and then Velcro in place. And if you need out, you just pull that seat ahead, slip it out. But that's where we are, making good progress. The aluminum channel I got from McMaster Car, same as this aluminum here. This little aluminum bar I actually bought in town, but making good progress. So we now have the front cockpit seat back, seat base, and the front cockpit seat bottom cut and installed. I left a 1/4 inch gap for material, when the seat gets wrapped in vinyl and all of that stuff. Again, this is This is completely bare. This is not how it's going to look. This is not how it's going to get left by any means. It's about 3 inches deep at the top. It's about 2 inches deep at the front. So when I put that 2-inch high density foam on there, it'll be flush at the front and 1 inch low at the back. So this will be covered in 2-inch high density foam. I'm going to pick up the foam to glue to the bottom, the ply. And then I've got to decide if I want to do 1 inch or 2 inch on the back. And basically that's just going to depend on, after I get the bottom foam in there, sitting in there and putting a piece of 2 inch behind me, and see how close I am to the steering wheel. If it feels a little too close, I'll use 1 inch for the backs. If it feels like I can go, a little bit closer, I'll use the 2 inch. But I left clearance everywhere, all the way around this stuff. About a 1/2 inch here, about a 1/2 inch here. Again, for the material and vinyl to wrap around so it doesn't interfere. It's not like a super tight fit. I want it to be snug, but not have to beat the seat in. And then you can see the overlap right here. This is a 1/2 inch, and that's done on purpose. When I cover all this in subdeck, that's roughly a 1/4 inch. And then I planned on doing all of my mahogany veneers on the top deck, also a 1/4 inch. So we're looking at about a 1/2 inch of thickness. So I made a little spacer, set it on top of the frame, and drew a 1/2 inch line all the way across, and then cut it to that. So when the subdeck is on, and then the mahogany veneer is on, the top of the seat should be just flush with it. Should be just about right. And the bottoms are the exact same measurements. I left them overhang about a 1/2 inch. But the bases are exactly the same, front and rear. The cutout should be pretty much the exact same where it's cut out for around the armrest. The overall width should be the same, but the height will be different on the rear seat. It is shallower, not as deep. But I haven't got any of the T-nuts in here yet. Obviously, I've just got the seat back clamped in place, but we're making fantastic progress. It's turning out very, very good. Very satisfied with the look. So, moving right along. All right, so we now have our T-nuts countersunk and installed in the plywood. One here, one over here. And then from the back side, you can see the stainless bolt and washer. And they're a hair long, so I'll have to trim them back just a bit. But the front cockpit seat back ply is now secured. I've got a C-clamp up here to keep everything from rattling and vibrating because of the stereo. But after it's got vinyl wrapped over it and bolted up snug, that vibration will be gone. We've got the rear cockpit seat back cut out, and you can see I've extended these little wings to cover some of this back here. I think I'm going to take about 1 inch of these off, maybe a little bit more, maybe 1.5 inches of the wing off, because I want it to kind of fill this area. But on this side, I need to be able to reach through there to get to my 150 amp DC breaker in the event that it pops or something like that. I'll still be able to drop this seat back down incredibly easy, but it would be nice if I didn't have to, if I had to reset that breaker, if I could just reach in and push the button. So I'll probably take, 1 inch to 1.5 inches off these wings over here. I now have the steer cable reinstalled in the boat. So you can see the rack is now bolted. You can see all my clearance behind my wires. Everything clears good. No issues. Comes around behind the deck. No clearance issues back here at all, behind the speaker. And it dips over a little bit through the frame. Now the front cockpit seat back frame. Then it goes through frame 2, back behind this speaker. And look at that painful hole right there, dear Lord. So I did a ton of research, just digging and digging and digging, trying to find out where about this hole needed to be. I was trying to look for the distance from the inside face of the transom to the center line of the steer cable, tilt tube, and also elevation-wise from the top of the motor bracket to where the tilt tube was going to be. And I think I'm pretty close. Of course, that's 1.5 inch hole, and the cable's only about 1/2 inch wide or so. So I've got room to play around a little bit and fudge it. But we drilled that hole. Something else I did, you can see the angles I drew on here. I took a piece of PVC and I taped on some of my 80 grit emery cloth or sandpaper and used that for a round sanding tool. So basically I found my angle, I drew it on the frame here. I stuck this up underneath and I started sanding that degree, because what was happening is the cable was coming along here and then had to dive underneath this support, and then had to poke right back up through the motor well to be in the right spot. So it put a little bit of an S curve in the cable right here, and I didn't like that. So I started sanding some relief. You can see it right here in the bottom of the carling, rear cockpit carling. So anyhow, I sanded that up about, there's a good look at it. Again, it follows that angle that you see right there, but it's about 5/8 of an inch deep, just to give that cable a little more relief. So now it dives down, but not near as far, and pretty smooth transition through the motor well. So just a little bit of fancy sand work to get that to fit up. Got the motor well hole. Here it is over here. Now I'm getting ready to build a nice little cover with a rubber insert, and I'll show you details on that. But that's roughly where the steer cable is going to be. This is roughly where it's going to connect to the outboard. Right in there somewhere. This should be really close to the right height, really close to the right depth, but I searched through pictures. Geez, I don't know, probably about 200 or 300 pictures, and almost all of the tilt tubes are in the exact same location, or really close enough that that location hole set will work. But it wasn't like I just went and punched random holes in this thing. I actually did quite a bit of research to figure out where the majority of them should be. We're making good progress. So here's a real quick look at my bulkhead that I made. It is made out of African mahogany, and you may or may not be able to see it, but there's a rubber seal in there. Just a piece of flat rubber. What is that rubber? Well, it's nothing more than an inner tube. I have this spare big truck inner tube, large truck inner tube. You can see it's pretty thick. So I just took my scissors and cut out a round that was the size I wanted. Now out of the very center, this steer cable, the black part, is actually a 1/2 inch. Well, I cut a 5/16 hole in the center of that so it would fit tightly on here. Now, believe it or not, even with how thick this inner tube is, I was able to stretch that 5/16 hole over that 1.25 inch nut. It stretched right over it. It took a little effort, but once I got it back over this side and onto the black plastic covering or coating on my steer cable, you know, it still shrunk right down nice and tight on it. So it's an incredibly good fit. So what I did was I made this. This is a 1/4 inch round over on the outside. The inside is just sanded smooth by hand. It's about a 1/2 inch thick. Now I'll slip this off. There you can see the rubber inner tube. I haven't cleaned it up. It's still got some of the white powder that you see that's inside inner tubes. But anyhow, you can see how it's tight on that cable. There's no slack or no room for anything to get past it. It's a good snug fit. And then on the back side, you can see the recess where I used my router to recess not quite the full thickness. Basically, I left about, I don't know, 80 thousandths or so of the rubber thickness not compensated for. So when this is bolted up tight, you actually got to snug up the screws to pinch it all the way tight. So it'll make a fantastic water seal around the outside, because it's not quite that tight. But that's my little bulkhead fitting. And I'm going to leave this, you can see there's a little bit of room for adjustment, but also the entire hole diameter here that the cable can move around, up, down, left, and right. So I'm going to leave this loose until I get the motor, get the tilt tube steer cable installed, and position the motor on the transom and snug it up where it's going to be. Then I will locate this and drill and screw it. I'll go ahead and get it coated in epoxy and finished. But that's my little bulkhead. I think it turned out really nice. It is pretty looking. And again, there's going to be more holes in this motor well, and I'll probably do something very similar to this. There's going to be another hole, and I'm not sure where I'm going to put it yet, but there'll be another hole probably over here for the throttle steer cables to come through. There'll be a hole somewhere over here or here for my fuel line to come through, and then there'll also be a hole, and maybe two, for my bilge pumps. I'm going to try to do one center hole and tee off to each bilge pump, so the bilge pumps can pump out of the boat into the motor well, and it'll self-drain out the 2 drain holes, which I have also not drilled. I still got 5 more holes to put in this motor well. But as far as the throttle and shift cable, fuel line, and those 2 will be basically the exact same bulkhead design. The hole for my bilge pumps, that'll be sealed in a different way. And also the holes for my motor well drains will be sealed in a different way. But I'll probably build 2 more of these little mahogany bulkheads because I just love how they look. Nice and clean. It's a really good seal. I'm in at $0, just some scrap crap I had laying around. Making good progress. Well, today I was working on making templates or patterns for my kick panels or door panels or whatever you want to call them inside the boat. So I got in there, I measured my overall width. I left a 1/4 inch gap on each side for the vinyl to wrap around fit wise. So I took my overall width and again subtracted a 1/2 inch. I did the same with the overall height. Took my overall height, subtracted a 1/2 inch from that as well. I matched these angles with my, here it is. Sorry, I got a mess everywhere. With my bevel square, I just set that in the boat, spun it around until I got the angle, locked it down, and then transferred it. So I couldn't tell you, you know, this is frame, or I'm sorry, this is 12 degrees. This is the rear cockpit seat back. But frame 2 up here, I couldn't tell you what angle that is. I just copied it with the bevel square. But I decided in my marine vinyl, I'm going to get, all the interior is going to be done in marine vinyl, white marine vinyl, bright white. I decided to go with 2-inch pleats. I like the pleated pattern. I'm going to do a combination of pleat and a slight stitching design on the seats, but again, 2-inch pleats on the seats. So as you can see, all of my pleats will be 90 degrees from the armrest, regardless of what these angles are. 90 degrees from the top of the armrest. So I made the cardboard templates. I then transferred that to more of the Meranti marine ply. That's the Hydrotech 1/4 inch. So I transferred it onto that, and these are just scraps I have left over. And cut those out, rounded all the edges off, and I just slipped them up in the boat. So that's, you know, obviously it's not bright white, but that's, you know, roughly how it's going to look in there with 2-inch pleats sewn into that white marine vinyl for door panels. So I got the port front cockpit cut out. I also have the port rear cockpit cut out. And it's a really nice fit. Everything looks good. The rear, I just took it about 2 inches beyond the armrest. We're going to have 2-inch thick high density foam on this seat back, probably 1 to 2 inch, but probably 2. That'll obviously cover this gap up down here and all this. So I just needed to make it beyond that seat back. I think I ran it 2 inches beyond, but that's where we are. So I've got the port side done. The port front side is identical to the starboard front. The port rear is identical to the starboard rear. So I just have to duplicate them, cut them out, sand them all down again. I radiused all the corners of these. It's a 1-inch radius because we're going to be wrapping marine vinyl around them. I don't want any sharp corners or edges that could tear that vinyl. So all 4 corners on both of these are 1-inch radius rounded. Same as the seats, like down in here, this is a 1-inch radius. And to do that, I'm really not doing anything more spectacular than using a 1-inch OD washer. Basically, I just lay it on here, give myself the thickness of the pencil lead on each side, draw it, take it over to my Gary the Snail disc sander and knock the corners off. But that's where we are, making good progress. We'll get the starboard side cut out, all the lines drawn and test fit. Once I get the starboard side done, I still need to pick up my 2-inch high density foam and get that cut to fit, make some slight modifications to the wings on this rear seat. But once the foam is cut for front seat and back seat, and all 4 of these are done, I think I can take all of that. I'll probably epoxy encapsulate it, but aside from that, I think I can take it all down to the upholster and drop it off and say, here you go. So we're getting close. Making fan-damn-tastic progress. So today, I've got the first encapsulation coat on all of my door panels or kick panels or whatever you want to call them. You can see I now have a coat of epoxy on the motor well steer cable bulkhead, that little mahogany bulkhead we made. So that's it. I just coated these front and back and all the edges. I'm not sure if I'm going to do 2 coats on these. We'll see how bumpy they turn out. When I'm done, I may sand them up and put a second coat. I may not. I don't know. But I just wanted to get a little extra encapsulation or protection on these. But barring a second coat, I could probably take these and drop them off at the upholsterer. We have a couple of upholstery shops in town. I've chosen one to test, see how they do on these door panels. If they turn out good, I'll go ahead and bring them the seats and have them do those too. And I don't know how far off I am from that yet, but we're making good progress. You may or may not be able to hear my battery charger. I do my best to keep the battery topped off. You can see I've got my little charger hooked up to it. We're at 96% charged and 12 volts. So anyhow, I try to keep this topped off because since I put the stereo in here, I have been playing it quite a bit. And I think I was hammering the stereo at probably 3/4 volume for the last half hour, and the battery dropped, I think, 6%. So it's a very efficient amp. But at that rate, you know, I could run the stereo for 5 or 6 hours probably at 3/4 to full volume and still have plenty of juice left. That's what we're working on, encapsulating coats, making good progress. All right, so today we have modified these little wings on the seat. Took 1.5 inches off of each side, so they don't protrude near as far, but it gives me plenty of arm room to reach beside and reset that without dropping the seat. Again, that's resetting the 150 amp breaker. So I modified that, cut them off, rounded all the edges, and put it back in. Did that today. Our kick panels are completely dry now, and I'm debating on whether or not to put a second coat on them. Just like everything that you do an epoxy coat on, generally the surface is rough. Yeah, you can't really see it. I mean, it's fairly smooth, but you can feel the little bumps on it. I don't think I'm going to do a second coat on these. I mean, they're not submerged. Basically, it's just to keep any water from seeping up into them. Again, it's marine ply, so that really shouldn't matter anyhow, but I wanted to do at least 1 coat. So they're dry. I think that's probably all I'm going to do. You can see here where it's really, really smooth. You can see that line here and here. That's the width of my 2x4s where the wax paper was laying. It's actually incredibly smooth right there. Everywhere else it's got little bumps. So I think I'll probably sand the back side at least, because I'll be attaching these with some 2-inch wide Velcro strips that'll run one across the top, one across the bottom, and then those will slip up in there and kind of Velcro to the sides of the boat. So they'll come out easy, but they'll peel off easy as well if I need them to. And I think I'll sand the back sides of these just to get them smooth, so that, well, not smooth, smoother, but with a slight rough texture that the adhesive on the Velcro can attach to well. I don't want a really slick surface, but anyhow, making good progress. Well, it's officially November 1st, 2016. For the month of October 2016, you can see we went up 18.25 hours. Most of that, of course, was on seat and interior stuff. We spent a whopping $19.84 this month. So total hours into the zip are 18.25, brings us up to 564.75 hours into the zip, and $19.84 brings us up to $6,650.28 invested in the zip. So this month, the vast majority was on the seats, 13.75 hours. There was 4 hours into mechanical and half an hour into epoxy encapsulation. So that brings us up to, let's see, on the seats, a total of 26.25 hours up here. Mechanical, 4 hours, and that brings us up to a total of 8 hours on mechanical and a half hour of epoxy. Brings us up to 39.5 total in epoxy coats. So we're making good progress. Obviously, we're getting closer to the holiday season, so I won't see you guys until December 1st, so I hope everybody has a happy and safe Thanksgiving. I normally never, ever bring politics into my videos because I feel that, I'm doing these videos for educational and maybe slight entertainment purposes, and I don't want to muck it up with a bunch of politics, but I can't encourage everyone enough to get out and vote. We have 7 days until Election Day, and so definitely go out and vote if you haven't already. Again, I'm not going to get too political. I'm not really going to talk too much about the candidates other than I am a huge supporter. Let me say this more correctly. Huge. I am a huge supporter, with a Y, of the Second Amendment. If you couldn't tell, there's a bullpup 12 gauge I'm working on, AR-15 lower that I'm working on. So if that doesn't give away who I'm voting for, I don't know what else would. But thank you for watching. Please rate and comment, and dear God, don't comment politically. I won't even bother listening. But we'll catch you on the next update of the Zip.